And welcome back, guys. I've decided to just do a pretty short, quick composite of the layers, some of the layers we rendered out before. I actually didn't end up rendering the environment layers yet because I feel like it might be a waste of time, given that in the next few videos I want to add some dust and some particles and make some of this debris roll about on the ground. But I did for now just render out the particle layers that we do have. Like, I definitely want to add a few more, but it's good to kind of bring these together and mess around with them a little bit in the comp. And usually something comes up while I'm trying to get these to look good. I'll sort of have an idea and be like, wow, yes, it would be great to have a layer that does whatever. So it's kind of useful to, at least at some point while you're working in Houdini, just render it out instead of continuously adding more and more, and just start comping what you've got, and then go back to Houdini with some new ideas and work on layers from there. So for now, what I do have is I've got the renders of the 3 layers we have. So that's what the tunnel one looks like. And also just a reminder, here in Fusion, this is the LUT. So I'm now displaying the viewport with the LUT on. And similar to how we had it set up in Houdini, you just choose OCIO, and then under Edit, there's a config. So basically, if you download the OCIO LUTs, but obviously you could use whichever LUT you want. In here, the baked LUTs are the ones that you use in like Houdini. But if I come up, there's a config, and that's what Fusion will use. And then you set your space here. So the same way I had it set up for the mantra renders, ACES CG to sRGB. So that's that. And let's have a look at our renders. So that's that layer. Then we have the one which is supposed to be the more erratic layer. And this is the one that we attribute transferred the position of the particles onto lines that were copied around the circle. So you can kind of see it a little bit, not as much as I was hoping. But I think it adds something, especially that outer circle. There's like a slight transfer there, and I think that's pretty cool. And then this one. And this one was the one that we tried to use the pop fluid, which again, it's not as extreme as I was kind of expecting it, but I think it looks pretty cool. And also what I've done is I've plugged in, now just a note as well, you might be using Nuke instead of Fusion. So most of this is completely transferable. I think I use Nuke as well. My preferred program is Fusion, but it's pretty much the same. Like, I don't think I'm not doing anything advanced in Fusion, and you could probably find an easy way to do every one of those in Nuke as well. In this case, I've just put down a reader or a loader. I'm loading in the frame, and then you can see this has the watermark, and I'm using a rectangle just to mask that out. At the end, I might still have the watermark on, which is fine. It's just you don't want every single layer to be merging with that watermark, because we're going to add glows, and that means the watermark's going to start glowing, and I don't really want that. So let's do a quick first pass of this comp. So at least to start with, we'll just merge all these layers together. So I've got them in what I consider the right order, which the background would be the tunnel. And then this one we can merge on top. And then this layer will merge on top again. So it might not matter, because I might end up burning this in, or in Nuke it would be plus. So that's just merging them together. And I'm also going to just put down, because we don't have an environment render, I'll put down a background. Just make sure the resolution is the same. And if you are working in Fusion, the background doesn't automatically default to float 16, so always change that under the image tab. And I'll just set some sort of gray background for us here. Just quickly, because it's not that useful to view these like super intense emissive effects on black, because the minute you merge that then onto the actual rendered environment, it's going to look completely different. So I'm getting quite a lot of banding here. I'm not sure why. Let's just drop that on. Right, so I am going to just do what I usually do, and that's, I want to look mostly at them merged together and then start tweaking the colors, because I need some of these layers to stand out from the other ones. So like we might go, it's very intense, and I think it's so bright here that we're actually losing detail, so I'm just going to knock this back. And then we'll go for maybe a slightly different tint on this one. I can be quite extreme here, because I plan on color correcting it all together as well down here. So it's not that useful to do them all separately. And eventually I'll be putting some kind of grade on the whole effect to kind of make it all feel like the same thing. So this is more just sort of playing around, trying to get the layers to feel distinct from each other, and also just messing at the moment with how much range I have in the render. So you can see if I bring this down, there's quite a lot of small highlight detail there, which is good, and then I can just gamma this up to kind of bring back the low density stuff. And then this layer is also super bright at the moment. So there's lots of cool stuff going on in there, and if I don't gain down, you kind of don't see some of that. So let's go for a slightly purple tint on this. I'm going to try something actually, and that's just gain and gamma down until I'm left with just the smaller bright parts, and then actually plug in a background, which in Nuke that would be a constant. So I'll mask that and maybe make this slightly purple. So what that's giving me is a nice flat version of the effect because it's taking just the alpha. So, you know, I can ignore all the color, the point color I have on there, and just get a flat version of the effect. I actually do this quite a lot, and it just gives another layer of something to work with in the comp. And then I'll just merge this back on here and burn it in. And this is the one that's the same as plus. And if I'm burning it in, I should be switching off alpha. Basically, when you burn it in, it actually adds the alpha on top of the alpha underneath. So you'll end up with alpha values over 1, which isn't good, because when you start merging that on top of backgrounds, you start to get some pretty strange effects. So usually if you're plussing, or if you're burning in the case of fusion, make sure to switch off alpha from the merge. So you can see what I've kind of done here is just taken this raw layer and just like brought out some of the information that was missing just a bit, and then really added contrast to these highlights and merged them back on top. And already I think that looks pretty cool. Yep. So I quite like that. So that's kind of like what I'm always doing when I first have a look at my layers in comp. I'm kind of seeing the ranges on each one, changing them all slightly, bringing them back together, and even though it looks kind of ridiculous, then I'll start color correcting and adding glows from here to try and blend them all together. So for one, put down a brightness and contrast, and probably just maybe add a little bit of contrast here. I want to make sure I've got enough bright points, and then I'll go and check alpha. So I'm looking at the values popping up at the bottom here, just to make sure I don't have anything above 1. So that's fine. So bring this right down. So this is, especially because I'm going to add some glow here, this is completely unworkable, I think. So I'm usually knocking back the super bright stuff and then adding the glow, and then maybe gaining the whole thing back up. Now my glow, I don't use the glow tools in the comp. I'm always making it myself, and I always make it from scratch for some reason. I don't know why. So the reason I do that is just to get much more control. So you'll see what I mean here. I have one blur. Actually, I'm going to put down a brightness and contrast here and just clip white. You see what happens if I do that. So if it's quite contrasty and you start blurring, the only parts that stand out are the super bright ones, and I kind of want to flatten that before I add a glow, so I'll clip that all down. So you want a small blur, and a medium, and then I like to have a super massive. basically burn all of these in. Switch off the alphas. And then I know you're probably thinking this is ridiculously roundabout way to get a glow, but I promise you it's worth it. And I'll burn the glow on top as well. Right, so that's fully gained. I mean, you can see here. I mean, you can't work with that. Here I have a much more reasonable level to add a glow and then color correct afterwards. So in terms of the control I was talking about with the 3 blur glow, I basically knock all these off, and then looking at the image, I'll add just enough gain of the small glow just so that you see it, and I'll zoom in here, maybe on this bright bit, just enough. And the thing I see so much is people will just slap a glow on and you end up with this kind of thing, and that's the worst. So just enough there that you see it, and then onto the medium one. The idea here is to kind of make the small glow really fade. So I'm just going to exaggerate this to show what I mean. If you had a super visible small glow like this, then your medium would need to be just bright enough to make that small glow feel like you can't tell where it falls off. So what I'm looking for is basically a super slow fall off of the glow until it reaches the hot spot. And you should never be able to identify like the end of the glow. So you see, even something like that, you can't tell where the glow is ending. So that's about right. And then I can come and like brighten it up here or make it more blue. Trying to see why this background is so banded. Yeah, it's on the right thing. I wonder if it's the ramp. We need to keep an eye on that if we bring the environment renders in, just to make sure the dark areas aren't too banded. I'm not sure why that's happening. It might actually be my monitor settings. So I mean, the glow is pretty heavy, but looks kind of cool. Also, like, I wasn't expecting to see so many dark areas, but I kind of like it. So in the end, what we might do is say, once the portal's on the environment, we basically burn that in as well, so we get rid of every single dark area, which is the more classical, fully emissive magic. But yeah, I hope you can see how much of an effect this really sort of customized glow can have on it. So that's kind of like my basic approach to comping magic in general. And then I usually follow it up with another few color correctors or brightness and contrast, just to then rein in the colors again, because you can see I've got some pretty radically different colors here. I'm then dimming it down quite a lot, and I can bring it back up. Maybe I'll put this glow to 0.5. You know, I can add more contrast here or go the other way. But in general, if I'm happy, then I'm usually just shifting the color tones slightly. So everything goes slightly green and a bit more blue, and you can see how the colors start to blend together. And those differences we had here are just helping separate them slightly. And then looking at the finished image, I'll come back and try things like, say, before the glow. I've got this gain that's knocked right back, and I'll try and just gamma up slightly. Maybe reduce the saturation a bit. And I definitely want this middle layer to kind of pop. So you can be really artistic at this point, because you're basically looking at a finished image and you can tweak every element of that to get exactly what you want. So a few other things, a few little tips before I stop this video. Especially if you're using Fusion, there's the displace, which is really useful for magic. And not only the background, which we will do once we've got the environment in, but also just to displace itself. So like I can take that and maybe this. I will clamp this again. And then plug that into the displace. And we put the center at the center of the portal, and see how it kind of warps everything outward. So especially useful for us because we haven't rasterized the particles into a volume. And I mean, if you look at these, the point count's not enough that you can't tell its individual points. So displacing it's kind of helping slightly to feel more like a continuous magical surface. And obviously, I mean, we could go extreme with that. But I don't think we want that. Just a subtle distortion is actually works quite nicely. So yeah, that's the basic. I mean, if you kind of ask me in general, what do I do when I'm comping magic? This is what most of it looks like. So I'll lay these all out, look at the final image, and then come back and tweak individual colors and glows while looking at the final result. So we will do more of that later. I'll save this, and in the next video we will start adding the environmental effects and make a few extra layers for the portal. We'll render those out as well, and then eventually dive back into the comp and finish this effect. So I'll see you in the next video.